Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to That's So Fringy podcast. We're here doing a Sunday episode. I'm Rick.
I'm Kristen.
And I'm Bethany.
And this week we didn't have a guest because we scheduled out a little bit further and left ourselves a slot so we could do another episode with just us because we like to spice things up every once in a while, you know, flip it on you.
We thought maybe you missed us.
Yeah.
We didn't think. We knew. We knew for sure. So anyway, we hope that you enjoy this. But first, we got a couple of things that we want to talk about, like liking and subscribing, right? This is where you do your part, you know, as the community, and you like and you subscribe and you send it out to the people around you, because the call of Jesus is to evangelize. And we, you know, talk to everybody about Jesus. So it's really easy for you to just slip this to somebody, if you know what I mean, you know, just like, here, listen to these weirdos. So hopefully you guys are getting a lot of information out of our episodes that we're having, and we're just going to continue to put the pedal down because we've got a lot of upcoming guests and a lot of things that we're going to be getting into. You don't want to miss it. You don't want to miss any of it.
Mm-mm.
No.
Mm-mm.
And also video. For those of you that don't know, we have video. But if you're only listening on Apple Podcasts or a podcast app for that matter, you're not going to see us. So you have to go to YouTube or our website where you can see us, or you can get Spotify, and Spotify actually has it within the app, which is pretty cool. So if you just want to listen and then pick it up every once in a while just to see, like,
or if you're nosy like
something.
me and you want to see what the guests look like. I always want to see what the guests look like.
Mm-hmm.
I have to match a face with a voice. So
you have to.
Yep.
You guys, we are really enjoying doing this, and we hope that you guys are enjoying all that we're putting out. So with that, we wanted to transition into a thing that we've been researching currently, and it is the finders. The finders. So this episode is going to be about the finders. And for those of you that don't know what the finders are, a lot of this information came out from some declassified FBI files. Now, you can get on to the FBI website and actually find these files yourself, but we're going to link them on our show page on the website, and then link that in the description below. So you can go and read these. I will save you some trouble. This is why we're doing this episode, because I've read a lot of these pages, and it's like 300. What was it, Beth? Like 360
just on the
something?
first part.
322, which is a really weird number. Ugh.
Yeah.
But yeah, 322. On the first part, there's actually 4 parts to the FBI declassified documents. So
yeah, it's exhaustive, but it doesn't really tell you a whole lot. You have to dig deeper, and that's what a lot of people have done. And so we wanted to bring some of that information to you guys tonight. So look for that link down there if you do want to read these actual documents. But Beth, why don't you start us out with what are the finders? What are these documents talking about?
So, yeah, nobody really knew what they were, who they were, until the late 80s. So 1987, I believe it was in February, in Tallahassee, some anonymous human reported that there was 6 children in a park and 2 very well-dressed men who were with them. The children appeared very disheveled. They had like bites all over their bodies, not just bug bites, but like bites, like possibly human bites.
They were filthy,
super dirty, malnutrition. I mean,
and they were like playing like animals. Like they weren't playing like normal kids on a playground.
Yeah. So an anonymous person called it in to the Tallahassee Police Department, and they went out and then they pulled over the van that they were in and then ended up arresting these two men. They started questioning them, and there was a lot of pushback. They were like not really wanting to talk about, who are these kids? Where are you guys going? One of the guys said they were taking the children to a special school in Mexico. And these kids range, I think it was from like 11 down to 2 years old. So a fairly wide range of kids there. So they ended up, separating the children from the men and doing some questioning. The kids were, again, very disheveled, didn't really know how to communicate with like adults. They were asking to use the bathroom outside.
Yeah, they had no context of like what a television was or
Mm.
like modern conveniences like bathrooms. They had like no concept of any of that. And the only thing that they were saying was that those men were their teachers. Is that right?
Yeah,
They were their teachers. That was all they really knew.
And that they were being weaned from their mothers. So they knew who their mothers were, but they hadn't seen them in over 2 months. Again, this was in February, so they had talked about they hadn't seen them since like Christmas time. So
yeah, because people need to be weaned from their mothers. Like I get it if you're talking about breastfeeding, but it sounds like they're talking about weaning them off of their mothers as like not needing them anymore.
Right. That's very
weird.
strange. So Tallahassee, there was a couple really good investigators that were, super curious and wanted to get down to the bottom of what was going on. They ended up taking the kids to the hospital and doing, I assume like a rape kit to see if there was any kind of signs of sexual abuse. 2 of the children did exhibit signs of sodomy and sexual abuse. But then when asked about it later, they got really weird. The older one, they refer to her as Mary. She got really weird about it. Like, no, there was no bad touches. There was nothing. And then she kind of shut down after that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a telltale sign right there for anybody that has kids. Like, the thing that they don't want to talk about is the very thing that happened,
Yeah.
Exactly. So the kids were super sketch. And then the stuff they found in this van when they pulled these 2 guys over, it looked like the kids had been living in there for like a while. Like it was filthy. It smelled really bad. Like it was in bad condition. But then they also found like some computers and floppy disks. And so this was in 1987. So for some perspective, like the earliest computers were barely out, if out. Like Windows 95 didn't come out until 1995, and this was 1987.
Right.
So technology didn't exist the way that it does now. So for them to have computers and have some of this technology didn't add up. None of it added up.
Yeah, they had a TSR 80, which I'm not a computer person at all, but they had a TSR 80 computer in the van, and according to the kids, these 2 men who were their teachers were in contact with a man that went by the name of the Game Caller. They didn't know his real name at that point. We'll get into that later, but
that's all the kids knew him as.
Yeah, the Game Caller would get in touch with the 2 men in the van, and they would play games, according to the kids. One of the games that they talked about playing was they would find a man on the street and strip him down and take all of his money. And this is coming from an 11-year-old girl explaining this game that they played.
Right. Not going to make up something weird and random like that.
Right.
11 years old, you don't have that type of context even for something
Especially
like that.
Especially if they didn't even know how to use the bathroom, like a bathroom.
Yeah, fast forwarding just a little bit on this part, they did find out that these kids were living outside. They were living in the watermelon fields where this Finders Club, whatever you want to call it, originates in Washington, D.C., which again, we'll get into in a little bit. But they found that these kids were living outside in these watermelon fields and were not allowed inside. They found that they were eating an all raw meat diet, didn't know how to use a toilet, just really, really strange things that they were, and this is all coming from the kids. Like, this was not coming from the men because they pretty much shut down.
Yeah, the guys wouldn't talk much, it sounds like. They were pretty much like, no, we're not talking to anybody.
No, I mean, if they're traffickers, they know. They have a whole cover story. I mean, the whole teacher thing, taking them to Mexico, like, obviously this is their cover story. And what is he going to say? Like, yes, these are some children that we trafficked, so they have all of this stuff figured out. So let's talk about the DC connection, because the DC connection is very interesting to me. When they started investigating, they started finding that this had deeper ties, right? These finders, these particular guys were linked to this larger overall web of pedophilia and human trafficking, and they went by the name of the Finders, or the Finders Group. And so what kind of affiliation with DC have you heard of them being linked to, Beth?
So initially, I think the kids were the ones that said, yeah, we are from DC. And one of the men ended up confirming that that's where they were. They were traveling from DC to Florida to then take these kids to the special school for special kids in Mexico. Mm-hmm. So they track them
like special talented and gifted type children school.
Right. Which we know, going back to our MK Ultra episode, they disguise this, special gifting, whatever it is. That's where they're doing all these tests on these children to see where are they gifted? Where can we use them? So that was the cover story. They tracked it back to DC. Yes, they found the kids' moms, most of the children's mothers in DC, and then also Maryland. So the Maryland was kind of where it started. It sounds like there was a farm in Maryland that was owned by a guy. Marion Petty was his name. Okay. Turns out this guy was actually the game caller. Eventually they made that connection. So he owned this farm, and then they had another offshoot in DC. They got in contact with, again, these kids' moms, and the moms basically said, we let those guys take the kids, we're weaning them off of us. This is totally normal. This
is how we do it.
Yeah, we live a very different lifestyle.
Alternative lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
So so then Tallahassee police ended up getting in contact with the DC Metro Police Department and kind of started an investigation in DC, which, come to find out, they already knew about the Finders. DC police did.
Oh, I wonder how.
Yeah.
It goes deep, right? It's this. I mean, when we on this podcast talk about how all of this human trafficking is related to DC, at some point, we have to realize that there is a group of very organized, very specialized people that are just snatching kids all the time. That's what they do. They just snatch kids. And it's crazy to me that how they treat them, how these kids are moved from point A to point B. They don't care about their bathroom habits, obviously. They don't care about any of that stuff. And it's shocking. More importantly, it's shocking that all of those conditions are being provided by our own government, by the people that are in power, that we're so-called electing to come in and speak for us, we the people. This is the type of stuff that they're actually doing. And it's on the FBI website. You can read these documents.
Yeah, it's all there. It's complicated to read because it's redacted, and if you've ever seen how they declassify documents, I think they purposely just throw things, like they throw all the papers up in the air, and then wherever they land is the order they put them in, kind of a thing. So it's hard to get through. But so was it the DC police that they found a house, like a duplex or two houses side by side or something? Was it the DC police that found that, and they had already raided it, or did they raid it at that time when they found the children?
Yeah, so they ended up doing conducting a search warrant at the time that Tallahassee had contacted DC and said, hey, there's something weird going on here.
Okay.
And they did acted out the search warrant in DC on the duplex, and then another warehouse. And then at the same time on the Maryland farm. Somehow, though, before this raid happened, Marion Petty, who was the one that owned that farm in Maryland, told everybody to flee. Time to go. So there was actually no people there, but they did find a lot of evidence in these warehouses that they raided.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some weird stuff in these places. I mean, obviously one of them had like a lot of children's clothing and, stuff like that. They had obviously looked like children had lived there, or they had supplies for children. I think that was the warehouse.
Yeah, they had a lot of children's clothing. They found books on mind control and how to perform mind control. They found books on Satanism. And then they also ended up finding some pictures, some Polaroids of naked children. One of the police officers said, we're not saying that this is pornography, but it does look a lot like what we would consider pornography. So it was a really weird.
Didn't they have like a spot in this warehouse that looked like it was for filming? Like it looks like a studio type area. And then they had like other little areas in this warehouse that looked like a place that you would program somebody, like a reenactment center or, something like that. So there was lots of weird things in this area.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very, very strange. So then jumping back to Florida, a couple days after these two men get arrested, they're being held. The kids are being, taken care of in a secure location is what they said.
Yeah, I did read a thing that said, like, shortly after they took these men into custody and had the children, they were getting like bomb threats at the children, like where they would normally, like these shelters that they would normally put these kids in when you get them, like DCS has these places.
Yeah.
They were getting bomb threats at these places, and nobody should have the media didn't even know that this situation was going on yet. And they were already, so they ended up having to place them in a secure, like a special, like a black site with armed guards.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah, they had 24-hour security for these kids. It seemed to me like Tallahassee was taking this pretty seriously and like, we need to figure out what's going on here. And then DC was like, we already know about them, whatever. But sure, we'll go raid their warehouses. We'll just tip them off first so we can't arrest anybody.
Right. So there's actually no people there.
Yeah. So in Florida, I think it was 2 days after the men were arrested, a student at Florida State University is walking in front of the library, and there's a phone booth outside, and there's a computer, a TSR-80, inside this phone booth. So he takes it into the library and starts, getting into it. And there's a ton of information about the finders and about the reports that Tallahassee had started on the finders.
How long after did he find that computer from when, like, they originally arrested those men? It was not very long, right?
No, I think it was 2 days.
Yeah,
it was 2 days.
Like, not long enough that it's just, remember, technology was not at the push of a button back then.
Right. Yeah. So they found a bunch of weird stuff on the computer. They found some logs on how to buy children and sell children, which was very weird. So this student was like freaked out and turned it into the police. And then nothing really ever came of that. Like, we never heard anything else about this computer or what else was on this computer. It was obviously belonged to somebody in the finders.
Yeah.
I saw that there was something about, I don't know if it was in the search engine or what, but they were inquiring about the Chinese embassy. And then in the van, when they pulled the guys over originally, there was a Chinese to English dictionary, or what do they call that? Translation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when this Marion Petty guy.
Oh yeah, you should explain who this Peach is.
The game caller guy. He was actually a master sergeant in the Air Force. So when he got tipped off that they were going to be raiding his property in Maryland, he ended up flying out of the Andrews Air Force Base to China. Why China? I don't know. Nobody can really figure out. But there was also a dictionary that he kept with him, a translation dictionary. So there's not a ton of information about this guy. He passed away in 2003. He never had any charges brought on him.
He was a master sergeant in the Air Force. Rick, what does it take to be a master sergeant?
Quite a bit. I mean, you got to be in for some years and you got to work your way up. There's a lot of, leadership courses and stuff like that. I don't know specifically about the Air Force, but I know, for the Marine Corps, there was courses that you could take and schools that you had to go to learn about leadership and in order to advance yourself in the ranks. So it would take a while. And it is interesting that he was in the Air Force because there's a very big link to the Air Force and the deep state, because a lot of the really deep operations, especially with like UFOs and working with Raytheon and Skunkworks, Lockheed Martin, when you get into that realm of all of these military industrial complex people, they're working a lot with the Air Force. The Air Force is
right.
Usually,
well, if you think of this whole cabal as being global, I mean, how do they get from here to there? They have to fly there. I mean, the Air Force would be somebody that they would want for transportation purposes. They would want them in their back pocket for sure.
Yeah, and I'm not saying UFOs exist. I'm just saying that. I'm not saying that alien UFOs exist. I believe that there are a lot of UFOs, unidentified flying objects, that are man-made. We have a lot of those. We have all of those military industrial complex companies making all of those things. And, reverse engineering maybe of crafts that they found. But all of that said to say that it's usually the Air Force that is finding, if they do have down craft, it's the Air Force that's finding them. And it's the Air Force that's working with those craft and those companies to reverse engineer, stuff like that. So if there is craft, it's the Air Force, and it is Air Force bases, and it's very much Air Force. So if this dude is Air Force, it doesn't really shock me at all. And those are those connections that my mind make. But
yeah, I didn't make those connections as a non-military person. Like I wouldn't have. I just thought, oh, Master Sergeant. That I know
that's a big deal.
High up to be that. Our grandpa was a Master Sergeant in the Army.
Yeah.
So.
And he retired from the Army. That was his career. Right. So it takes a while. I didn't know if it was just time or if there was like actual, sometimes it's just the amount of time you've been in, and sometimes there's actual special things you have to do to.
Well, and it depends on which, what your MOS or your military job specialty is, depending on what you do, what your knowledge is in that area, how quickly you're advancing, and that type of stuff. Because you're not going to be a leader of your area of expertise if you don't really know it that well. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he's probably pretty knowledgeable, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was in some sort of military intelligence in the Air Force, because it seems like a lot of these intelligence communities are where they hide a lot of these operations. And then when you look at this one and you find that it's linked to the CIA, stuff starts to really get weird again.
So what's the link to the CIA with the finders? So let's go back. They end up raiding their warehouse, raiding their properties, all of that. So how do they make that connection between these people and the CIA?
Yeah, I'm not sure how the connection was made. Bethany, do you know how they linked it to the CIA?
It doesn't really say in the documents that I've read the connection. other than they knew about this group, cult, whatever you want to call it. There was already prior knowledge within the FBI, the CIA, the DC Metro Police, and the Maryland Police Department. They all already knew about these people. So how they knew about them, that's a great question.
Right. I did see a thing that was a internal memo, or there was lots of internal memos from the people in Florida, but there was also one from the people in DC that was like, hey, we're supposed to be investigating this, but kind of like a hands off. You guys don't need to do anything. Like, so DC was handling it, but by handling it, they meant nobody was to investigate it because they already knew about it. So it was like no big deal.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So then what ends up happening to the men? So we're in Florida. These men get taken into custody, kids taken away. Then what happens to these guys?
So they end up taking the children back to their mothers after they find their moms. The guys are in jail. I read a couple different places. It was 10 days. It was 6 weeks. Regardless, they were not in jail for a very long time, and charges were completely dropped. So the initial charge was, it wasn't a felony. It was a misdemeanor, like child
endangerment. Neglect. Okay.
And so that's what they were holding them on. And then after DC and the FBI and U.S. Customs was involved because it was over borders, they basically all said to the Tallahassee police, drop it. We have no evidence, even though there is plenty of evidence that was seized from these properties. They came out and said that we have no evidence. These people can live however they want to live. And they ended up releasing these two men to go about their business.
Yeah. Well, and that's how you know that it's connected to the government, or it's connected to the deep state. I should be more
somebody
specific.
Higher up that can make that decision. Yeah.
Right. Because for these charges to get thrown out like that, it reminds you of someone like Hunter Biden, or Joe Biden for that matter, and how there's this, two-tiered justice system in America where you've got these group of people that can just walk away from something like this. You can have children and be caught with those children, and the children can be saying the things that they're saying, and you can just walk away from that, and nobody's following up, and nobody's trying to.
Isn't the condition of the children, just their physical condition, isn't that evidence enough that there was neglect? I mean, they weren't showered, but that goes back to, if they call it a cult, then they're allowed to live how they want to live, like that. Yeah. Even though the children didn't make that choice. So that's a blurred line for me, but
yeah,
the parents are allowed to raise their children how they want. So if they want to not shower, they don't have to.
Well, and that's how the cabal has packaged all of their nefarious behavior, is in religion, right? Because religion has these certain, in America anyway, these certain protections that keep you from getting raided or keep all of these different things. You can do a lot of things just by saying, I believe that this is true. I believe that's in Satan, or I believe in killing babies, or I believe in being a person that's attracted to young children, I believe that is part of my religion. And it's like, you don't get to just use religion as a crutch to get away with everything that you're doing. But that's what they're doing. And we've allowed it for too long. And we need to, as we the people, we need to stand up and say, we're not allowing this anymore. You don't get to
and
just
maybe we'll have
bury
to do an episode later on about the fact that there's evidence that the CIA actually was behind a lot of the cults that started, a lot of the, like behind it as in funding and, turning a blind eye and all of that to a lot of these cults that started. Like there's evidence that Jim Jones, was affiliated with the CIA, which we'll have to do stuff about that later, because this Finders Club has more. There's more to the story.
Yeah, I mean, just think back to the 60s and all of the things that were going on in the 60s, all of the drugs, all of the free love sex, all of the occult stuff and Satanism. But then there was also a Jesus revolution going on, you know? So it's like there's been this war. It was all about
division, though. It was all about division. That's what they've been trying to do this whole time, which is what they're still doing, dividing people.
Yep. Divide and conquer.
Yep.
I mean, Jesus even says it, a house divided against itself cannot stand. And, it is what it is. We need to stand together and say we're not allowing this anymore. So what else you guys have about the Finders?
Yeah, so these guys get released from custody, either 10 days or 6 weeks or whatever, insert a number. There's no amount of time you can put these people in jail, in my opinion, for mistreating children, even if it is just letting them be filthy and covered in not just bug bites, but I'm sure those kids were biting each other. And I mean, they were acting like animals. So there's no amount of time that would justify doing that to a child, but 10 days to 6 weeks is definitely not enough time. So then they let them go. And then what happens after that?
Not much. The FBI comes out and, makes a statement to the public because
the journalists were mad.
Yeah. Well, and the cops in Tallahassee were upset. They were like, we saw and heard some really disturbing things from these children, and seemingly we're giving them back to their mothers, who said, no, it was okay. We gave permission to those guys. They're their teachers. So it was like the police officers were pretty upset, seemingly, in Tallahassee. There was
they were trying to be the voice for the children.
Right. So the FBI came out and made a statement because it was in the news in Florida at that point. Didn't sound like there was a lot of news coverage in DC or Maryland.
There was a New York Times journalist that was on it somehow. But, and then they were outraged at the treatment of these children and what's going to happen. And then it was within a few days, something happened and everybody was like, oh, it was all just a misunderstanding.
Yeah.
How these journalists went from being outraged and these police officers went from being outraged to, well, it's just a misunderstanding. I don't get it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if our episodes about how the media is controlled and everything like that and bought and paid for by the CIA and the deep state, then we know that they probably got a message from above that said, we're not talking about this anymore. Move on. Talk about something else.
There is some language in some of those declassified documents, which, probably would not have come out, if you think about it, had it not been for the Freedom of Information Act.
Oh, yeah.
Those would still be declassified. So that's, it's, thank God somebody wanted to find out some more information about this stuff. But there was some language in there that basically, from one of the higher ups at the FBI, special agent said, no more. You don't want to dive into this case anymore, talking to another agent. And then the FBI came out and said, we found no criminal activity. These two men have been released, and that's that. And then seemingly nothing was in the news about it any longer. In 1993, people were asking questions again, whatever happened to this cult, whatever happened to this group. And there's some blurps in the FBI documents from 93. But again, like Kristen said, I think they throw the papers up and wherever they land, they land. Nothing is in order. So.
Yeah. And heavily redacted. I mean, it'll be like this person, and you don't get to know their names. You don't get to know who they work for.
From, to, you don't get anything.
Yeah, but the thing that was clear was all the stuff that we've laid out up until this point. Those are the things that you'll all glean from those documents, is everything that Bethany laid out and Kristen laid out. Because
Bethany actually watched a documentary about it that we'll put in notes. But did they explain any more about who this Master Sergeant was, or what his connection to this cult was, or did he just own the property somehow? Like, how is he connected to these people?
Yeah, there's not a lot of information about this guy other than he did not go by his regular name. He went by the game caller. And he was the one who was in contact with these two men specifically, but whoever it was that, he was the one that called the shots and said what to do.
Yeah.
And that was coming from the kids. Children said the game caller would put whatever information on the computer to their teachers, and their teachers would then tell them, the children, what game it was that they were going to play.
Which is just gross, even that they're calling it games, that they're calling it he's the game caller and he calls in and gives them these weird games to play. It's like, it just makes you so sick.
There was one where it was like the game was that the kids were supposed to find out the man with a hole in his shirt and like put their finger in it and rip the shirt. It was like, these are weird. Like, what are these games? What's the purpose?
Yeah, very weird. It makes me think about the Hunger Games. Like, that was the first thing that came to my mind when I started reading about this game caller guy, because don't they have
it's not the architect. The architect is in the Matrix.
Yeah, no, it's the people that sit in the control room that are like,
yeah, but there's one guy that is
it was played by the guy, he died,
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Yeah. I'm
looking at him in my brain.
I think he was called the game caller or the game master or something like that, where he was the one who put up the, sent out all those bees or sent out
he was controlling the weather in the dome thing.
Right. I mean, that movie,
I didn't even think about that.
When you think about that movie, if you've watched it or watched the series, and you think about the world that we live in now, there's so many correlations, in my opinion, when you watch it with an open mind and not just like, oh, this is just a movie, because it's not just a movie, in my opinion.
It's not just a movie to them. I'll tell you that. Like, these controllers, these Hollywood types, it's not a game to them. It's not a movie to them. They're telling you exactly what they're doing. This is their real life. This is their reality. And it's shocking to so many people, because and that's the worst part about it, is they make you idolize these people. Yeah, you know what I mean? Like, they push you to have these football players, basketball players, Hollywood actors, musicians, all these people that are complicit in this child trafficking and sex trafficking and killing of babies. I mean, that's how these people get their careers, right?
Right.
So you learn all of this stuff, and then you're like, man, they like teach you to idolize the worst people in the world, and you don't even know that you're doing it. It's just what you're taught, but then when you learn, you're like, okay.
He's called the Gatekeeper, by the way.
The Gatekeeper.
Oh, the Gatekeeper. I was just looking it up on IMDb.
I knew you were, because I just looked it up. I'm like, wait, we got to stop the madness, because that's all we can think about. So we figured out.
Yeah, all of us, all the listeners too. Somebody out there in their car right now is yelling, like, "The Gatekeeper! You guys are so dumb! It's the Gatekeeper!" Yeah,
always mystery solved. I feel
now you know.
Very weird. I mean, of course they couldn't call him in the movie the game caller. That would be too much of an association with this Finders cult. But I mean, that's close enough. Like,
was there more kids ever found, or like, so when they went to that property where these people were living, they found the moms. Was there other kids, or were those the only kids?
Everybody was already gone.
Some other children. I read somewhere that they only found a few other children, but it was like a lot of adults, and this like a dozen children or however many kids it was. So not a ton of children at that point in time, but a lot of adults, and they lived this alternative lifestyle.
Yeah.
Nobody wore clothes. Just, I mean, who am I to judge, right?
Right.
But when you involve innocent children, and we don't, how do we really know that that was their mothers?
Right.
You know what I mean? They found a whole log of how to get children from out of country. Specifically, Hong Kong was mentioned in one of the documents. So, like, I don't know.
Like, did some of these women just go, "Oh, that one's mine," and then they just like, "Okay, here you go, have your kid back." Like, come on, they have to do paternity tests now before a dad can visit his kid if the mom says that's not the dad.
Right.
Like, I just don't understand. I don't understand.
That goes back to the two different rules, right? You got rules for these people, and you've got rules for us normal, everyday peasants. You know, we don't get to ask questions.
For driving to Subway, which is 2 blocks from my house, when I was 16 years old.
Let it go.
16 years old. They gave me for not putting my seseatbelt on. Like,
traumatized, apparently.
She was running late for work.
I was.
Jeez.
Didn't have time. And my seatbelt, to be honest, was broken. And I just didn't want to tell them that. So
the old Oldsmobile.
The old Oldsmobile.
Dang. You had an Oldsmobile?
I should have never got that ticket, though.
Yeah. Well,
I got rid of that car.
I know.
There's not a lot of information on the finders. You know, it's hidden on purpose. Yeah. I mean, there's a reason for all the redactions. There's a reason. I mean, these two guys and the women that they found and the children, all of that's not national security. Like that's
no. So why the redactions?
This has nothing to do with national security, or does it? Or does it? Because if anybody found out who was actually involved in all of this, it would be a big deal. It would be a mass uprising of the people, which I think is what's happening right now. Everybody's rising up and being like, you know what? We're not doing this children mutilation anymore. We're not doing
people are drawing the line, like drawing a firm line.
Yeah, for sure. As they should, you know, because you know, for too long, we kind of take the brunt of things as parents, and we can speak from experience because we have a lot of children. And so you take on a lot of that responsibility. You got to get them fed. You got to, teach them how to do this, teach them how to do that. You want to raise up your children in the way that they should go. And when they're older, hopefully they will not depart from it. Those are the type of things that we try to do as parents. And that's a lot of responsibility. We tell our kids all the
time, we're not raising children. We're raising men. Like we're raising adults. We're raising men and women. We're not trying to raise kids. We want you guys to be raised properly.
Yeah. And
not that it always works. But.
Yeah. When you take on that type of responsibility for your own children, and then you hear about other people's children being treated this way, it does something to you. And I think that this is why they're never going to survive. The cabal's never going to survive. Now that all of this information's out about what they've been doing to our children, they're never going to survive this. You can't stop this wave of rage that all of these parents are feeling right now. These parents and grandparents.
And I don't have yes, people can live how they want to live. I totally believe that. And being in home health nursing, there was times when, we'd have a patient that would be not taking care of themselves, or their house was filthy or whatever. And we want to call senior and disabled services and report them and be like, hey, these people are like living in squalor, and because I've done it, they'll come back and say they're allowed to live how they want to live. Like if they want to live with cat poop all over their house, they can, as long as they're mentally able to make that choice. Like they're mentally able to go, I just don't want to clean it up. I don't feel like it. Then they're allowed to live like that, which is heartbreaking, but you see it. And, we see it all the time, which sucks. But when you start bringing the kids in is when that escalates it to the next level. That's why it's surprising to me that between Florida and Maryland and Washington, D.C., and all these places, not one charge was issued against these men that were holding these children in a van. They didn't even have it. They weren't even in a dwelling. They were literally living in a van.
Yeah.
Like,
it's heartbreaking.
I just don't.
Yeah. I mean, we could go down a deep rabbit hole of Child Protective Services and the injustices that are there in that offshoot of our
and they're
government.
huge trafficking. They're a spoke in the wheel. How about we'll say that?
Yeah.
There's a lot of spokes that go into the wheel, but yeah.
Yeah, because I couldn't really find anywhere where they were called. I know it's not CPS in every state.
Right. It's DHS or whatever.
Right. But there seemingly I couldn't find a connection where, they called them and said, hey, can you guys help us pick up this investigation since it's involving children?
Right. And especially since it was going across state lines, you're talking about that's when the FBI gets involved. Dun, dun, dun. When you take a child across state lines, that's considered a national crime. So we're not talking about just a crime in Florida of them living in this condition. This is a crime, a federal crime, you would think.
Yeah, I mean, trafficking.
And they had the intent to take them to Mexico.
Well, the mothers came out later and said, I don't know why they said that. They were never going to take them to Mexico. Blah, 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 blah.
Did they ever say what, like, I know they said the final destination for them was going to be this school for gifted children, but did they ever have like an address or a place, or they just get to say whatever they want and there's no follow-up?
Seemingly, yeah. Yeah,
I mean, it seems to be that they just don't care.
Yeah.
And then that leads to the question, why? Or at least in my mind it does. Why don't they care? And that's a lot of people to not care. And you start to, the person that isn't as deep into these rabbit holes as we are, I can see how somebody would be saying, how are they hiding this from everybody? How are they able to take all of these children? Well, it's happening. Children are going missing all the time, like literally daily. And they control the media. So you don't get to hear about the things that they don't want you to hear about. They control the narrative online. They control the narrative, and this is an interesting thought I just heard about the other day is, do you guys know what MK Ultra was called before it was called MK Ultra?
Not Project Monarch, not that. Tell me.
It was called Project Bluebird.
That's right. I did know that.
Project Bluebird. And now, does everybody know what the logo for Twitter has been for so long? Does it start to make these connections come to your mind?
And this is the platform that is the chosen platform for celebrities and anybody famous to use. This is like, we're only officially putting our stuff on Twitter. Okay, well, why?
Yep. It's a mind control apparatus. Project Bluebird. So some things for you guys to think about. Obviously, the finders is not easy to find. Gosh, I couldn't wait to say that. And, if you get online, you're going to have a hard time finding a lot of this stuff. But we have already directed you directly to the FBI's website where the person did a FOIA. And so they had to
I don't know if we've explained the Freedom of Information, which is the FOIA, but it's so that's how all the declassified documents came out for MK Ultra, but it's, you have to be very specific. Like, it's not just, I want to know about this. It's like super, super specific, and you have to know the project name in order for it to become declassified. So they had to, whoever filed this Freedom of Information Act knew to write the finders as the CIA,
the finders
FBI
group.
Project. Yeah. So they knew to put that in there, which is the only way any of this stuff ever came out. So imagine all the projects, because, if you don't know by now, you should know. These CIA projects they're like, well, we stopped doing MK Ultra back in, 1970 or whatever, but which they did, but they just rename it something else. So then but then if you don't know what the name is, you don't know how to begin even trying to put this FOIA paperwork together.
Yeah. That's why whistleblowers are so important, And what is a whistleblower? It's just a human being. It's a person that finally decides that what is going on behind the curtains is not okay, and it's worth risking their lives and risking everything for this to come out. And that's what we've had, a lot of whistleblowers coming out, and we've had a ton of them come out in the last couple of months because of that whistleblower law that passed, where the NDAs, or the non-disclosure agreements, have been set aside for a time so that they can discuss all of these secret projects and classified things that are, we've gotten to the point now where the people are not going to deal with this anymore. People are standing up, which I love to see. The outcome of all of it, I'm not sure about. I don't know where it's all going to end up, where it's all going to fall. But I think we do always have hope in the fact that God is in control.
Right.
I saw this thing today that said, I'm not going to stress about anything. I'm not going to worry about anything because it's not in the Bible. In fact, it tells us in the Bible to not stress and to not worry. And the thing that I saw on the internet said, I'm just going to let God be God, and that's
right. And it's a reminder of that Bible verse that where God, says vengeance is mine. Like that's it's not our place to take vengeance on these people, because it also very clearly says if you harm one of these children, you'd be better off putting a millstone around your neck and jumping into the sea.
Yeah.
He's pretty specific about how he's
going to take care of these people.
You even want to call them people. I mean,
yeah, true.
How are you even a human being? Like, it's so disgusting.
I just don't know how you birth a child. You carry a child for 9 months. You birth a child. That connection is something that is like so profound. And then you hand this child over to these men, like willingly. It doesn't make any sense. That's what almost makes me feel like the moms are gone. The moms are dead.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
These are not their moms, because I don't know.
Well, if you think about generationally, if there's mind control or abuse or something generationally going on, these mothers really don't know what's going on. They've been programmed and controlled that this is the norm,
right?
And they may have multiple personalities or alters or whatever you want to call them, and they can flip on the mom switch,
and that's how they can survive day to day.
Yeah,
like that's how they sit down and eat dinner and do all the normal things, is because they have to have it a different place they go.
Yeah, I mean, they have a hierarchy of kidnapped children, which is hard to hear, but there's some children that are used for collecting other children. They'll use one child that's already been programmed and stuff to lure in more children. There's other children that are used for sex. There's other children that are used for sacrifices. And there's other children that grow up to be people that are giving birth to more children so that they can have more and more children. And some of those mothers, like Bethany, Kristen were saying, they're already brainwashed because they've grown up in this system of torture. They've grown up in this system of brainwashing, and this is their job. This is the job that they've been given, is to birth more children. And a lot of times it comes through rape. It's not even a good birthing experience for them, which is horrifying and terrible. But this is why we're talking about it, because it's actually happening, and it doesn't make any sense for us to just close our eyes and click our heels together and say that I just want to go back to Kansas because I can't fathom that this stuff is happening. But God tells us to be strong, that there's nothing that we're going to come up against that we're not going to be able to handle. He'll never give us more than we're able to handle. And I think there's a lot of people out there that think, I can't handle this. I can't handle children being hurt. I think you can. I think you can handle people out there listening. Hopefully you're hearing me and my heart. I think you can handle the brutalization and the murdering of children because it gives you the opportunity to do something about it. Now, if you were just going to hear about it and nothing was ever going to happen, that would be another thing entirely, because then you would be stuck with that trauma in your mind for the rest of your life. Right. But we are not asking anybody to be stuck in trauma. We're talking about this stuff so that there can be an awareness so that we can all do something about it. Because everybody in their own communities, in their own neighborhoods, in their own families can do their own part. You can teach your kids about child trafficking and help them to understand that we need to be careful. These are the things that we can look out for. If you're not doing that with your children, please do. Because they need to understand. They need to know that there are children out there that are trying to lure in other children. Like sick as that is. If you think about it,
that's how Epstein got all of his girls. They would be like, hey, we're, high school girls. They're like, hey, this guy will pay us $100 if we just go give him a massage. And that was how he recruited all of those hundreds and hundreds of girls to come to his house and give him massages. That was exactly it. That was their job, was to go get more. Because then if I bring Bethany in and she gets $100, but then I get $200 because I not only am coming and giving a massage, but I'm also bringing another person with me. That's how pyramid schemes work.
Yeah. And that's why the divorce rates are so high, and because they don't want the families to stick together. How much easier is it for you to steal a child from a single mother that's trying to just survive, and she's at work and her kid's at home. He's a latchkey. He comes home from school and he takes care of himself, and he just wants to go over to his friend's house and hang out, play video games. And his friend's dad is a trafficker and he has no idea. And the friend has been trafficked. That's not even his real dad. Like, we don't know what's going on in our own neighborhoods.
It happens a lot more than people realize.
Yeah.
But being aware, it was like whoever it was that originally called this in Florida, like, see something, say something. They called it in because they saw something. These men were super well dressed and really nicely put together, and these kids were clearly not. So it looked weird, and they called the authorities, which is what we should all be doing if we see something that doesn't seem right or doesn't look right.
Yeah, if they wouldn't have done that, then we wouldn't be talking about the finders today, because we would still not know.
Yep.
Because this is the only information that we have on them.
Yep.
So, anyway.
So we'll put the documentary in the notes.
Yeah, because there's a little bit more details in there about some more things that they found in those warehouses.
And some of the stuff that kids talked about, like there was some animal sacrifices or something. So, I mean, there's more to it than obviously what we can get into in an hour. So, we'll put the documentary there. And if you want to go through all the pages of the FBI declassified stuff, awesome. You'll see something that we didn't see, because the stuff that we have looked at, we all see something a little bit different. So, and that's what it takes, is a bunch of people putting their heads together and making sense of this ridiculously redacted paperwork.
Yep. Together we are strong. So let's continue to talk these things out. And we hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We know that you missed us. We get it.
Yes.
We miss us too a lot of times. But anyway, we hope you guys are doing well out there. And don't forget to stay fringy, my friends. All right, you guys, that's it for us. We're going to get out of here. Again, I'm Rick.
I'm Kristen.
And I'm Bethany.
And we are That's So Fringy Podcast. We'll see you on the next. Bye.
Bye.